and be able to get back again.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, we're looking forward to you coming, mate. So, yeah, the guys are still surfing in the middle of winter here, so they're keen.
Yeah, that's good. I think we are live now. So I will get Phil on here. He's jumping in, but welcome to our Shred Talk on mentoring. So a little bit, ACTS, as you guys know, it's a global network of action sports ministries all over the world, leaders. Our mission is to connect leaders who are making disciples of Jesus in action sports. Our goal with these Shred Talks really is to gather people around a conversation that will help validate your calling to action sports ministry, share resources, and ultimately grow your leadership. And so we want everyone to be involved in this conversation, but to help facilitate this, we've gathered a few leaders from around the world to partake on the call, but please do comment in your questions and invite others to join us. Today we're talking about mentoring, but before we jump into that, I want to have each person here introduce themselves with your name, where you're from, and what you do, and then we'll jump into our discussion together. So Dean, do you want to start us out?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Dean Dahl. I live in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And well, let's see. What did you want to know, Johnny?
Your name, where you're from, and what you do.
Okay, well, I work, I officially work for Young Life of Canada. It's a youth organization. And my role is a national kind of a role that works on all the kind of diverse and unique expressions of ministry that the organization does. So part of that is I have helped start and direct a thing called Skate Life, which is a skateboarding outreach that reaches across Canada and beyond. So that's me.
Awesome. Brett, you want to jump in?
Yeah, Brett Davis from Australia, down under. Sunny summertime here for our Southern Hemisphere. Been involved with Christian Surfers for over 40 years, helping pioneer that, and then also with the ACTS network, and particularly interested in mentoring leaders in other action sports ministries. I live just south of Sydney with my wife, and we're now empty nesters.
Wow, nice. All right, Eli, what you got?
Yeah, my name is Eli Conley. I live in Bend, Oregon in the US, and I'm the director for Climbers for Christ, which is a chapter-based ministry, mostly in the US, but a growing presence internationally as well. And I'm still new in the role, so I'm more here as an example of a mentee than a mentor.
Awesome. All right, Laura.
My name is Laura Matera. I live on the southern coast in New Jersey, and I serve with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, have a bit of a dual role as a director in my region with Surf and Skate Ministry, also just stepping in and doing a little bit of global action sports leadership. So I do have a background in social work and counseling, and so I'm super thankful to be on this call.
Awesome. Ryan, what you got?
Yeah, my name's Ryan Leeds. I live in Summit County, Colorado. I work for a ministry called Snowboarders and Skiers for Christ. I've been involved with the ministry for probably about 10 years now in different capacities, but for the last 2.5 years, I've worked as their director of leadership training. So that's what I do now.
Doing a great job of it too. Marty, you jump in.
Yeah, well, g'day everyone. I'm Marty Woods. With this accent, you wonder why I live in Japan, but I have a great job. I live in every Olympic, well, my wife and I live in every Olympic city, and we try and help the church prepare for the Olympics to work together. So we work with the Action Sports Network here, particularly festivals, and got an extra year in Japan because of the postponement, we hope, and not cancellation. So yeah, good to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, awesome. Phil.
Cool. Hi guys, I'm Phil. I'm from the UK, originally Wales, but been living overseas, working with Youth with a Mission, past 20 years, currently in Italy, have been for the last 12 years. I'm involved in all all sorts of, well, random miscellaneous stuff from event management to building action sports parks, work a lot with parkour parks, but also running training programs and some of the discipleship training program, which Youth of the Mission is famous for, but also we call them second level schools, training specifically people involved in the action sports ministry. So got into this world through running a skate park / action sports center for about 5 years in Switzerland, but now more involved in training up other leaders. So we've been doing that for about the last 10 years. So glad to be on the call. Hope I can help some.
Yeah, that's awesome. I am honored to be on this call with all you legends. It's pretty incredible to see the wide swath of leadership in different countries, different sports, different age ranges, different backgrounds. It's yeah, this is a legendary crew. So thanks for being here, guys. Well, today we are talking about mentoring, and I'm sure that you guys, everyone hears about mentoring a lot, whether it's in business or leadership or parenting, even in action sports. There are many world champions that refer to their mentor as someone who's spoken to their life and made a big impact in their life. So we want to kind of talk about what makes for good mentoring. How do you find a good mentor? How do you be a good mentor? How do you be a person who is open to mentoring? So with that, let's dive into this discussion. And for those of you who are watching, I see there's 4 of you on there currently. Please feel free to comment in questions that you might have as well as we go through this discussion. So what is mentoring as compared to coaching, consulting, advising, making disciples, all of those things? How is mentoring different? How is it similar? Anybody can jump in.
Okay, well, I'll hop in first. That's a great question, isn't it? And it's almost like such a different degrees of mentoring. I've been really fortunate. I had a mentor for 47 years. Wow. And I basically got his spirit. And I remember Richard Rohr wrote in one book, he said, every young person needs a mentor, not to get wisdom from, but to get their spirit. And so the way that I see mentoring, I base it from Hebrews chapter 12, and it starts by the big crowd of witnesses cheering you on. So I think a mentor is a cheerleader. And then the writer of the Hebrews says, getting rid of anything that tangles you up or holds you back, or in the Passion it says, the wounds that pierce us. And so I think in mentoring, there's something about dealing with the flesh. Jesus says, spirit's willing, the flesh is weak. And so the second edge for me is I want to help people to be transparent, to be honest, to deal with their flesh so their spirit can be awake. And then the third one that I just find really helpful, it says, setting out the race marked out for you. And I think part of what the job of the mentor is to just help them as they deal with their flesh, to have the spirit just helps them see their story. We need others. We lose the plot. So how do we come alongside and help people to write their story? And then the final bit, the bit I really enjoy, is looking to Jesus, the author, the perfecter of our faith. And I think that's our job the whole time. So at one level, it is a disciple, because a disciple is always trying to help them to look to Jesus. But I think there's something really important about dealing, like I just say with the people that I mentor, look, you've got to be honest with me. You've got to live in the light. And so the verse that I use most of all, I'll finish on this one, 1 John 1:7. If you live in the light as he's in the light, you have fellowship one with another. And then this beautiful bit, the blood of Christ cleanses you from all unrighteousness. So that's the way I see and try to model mentoring.
That's awesome. How else? How do you compare mentoring to coaching, consulting, advising, discipling?
I think about coaching as really skill development, right? It's not really getting at the heart of the matter. It's training more. I'm thinking like the body and kind of the fundamentals of playing a game, whether that's a game of life or, you know, a game in your vocation or in your sport. But I think of mentoring as Marty. I love the language that you wrapped around it, because it really was somebody coming alongside of you and walking with you in the unseen, right? You know, that's what I think about as mentoring, but it still has boundaries around it. There's an intentionality, and then there's a focus to that relationship and a moving forward and a health, you know, infused in it.
That's great, Laura. And I consider it's quite a spectrum of things in it, isn't it? You can sit down and have a casual conversation and give a bit of advice. You might be a consultant that's quite specific on a topic of life or leadership or business. Or you go right up that end where Marty gets to the heart of the matter, where you are really interested in the whole person reaching their full potential. So I think it's a spectrum that ranges. And often when people will often use the word mentoring. Oh, I'd like you to mentor me. And you need to ask, what do you mean by that? And sometimes people just want to have a casual chat. Some people, they just want a bit of advice. Some people want to go deeper and further. So good to get some clarity on that. And the only other thing I'd say about coaching in a classic sense, when I talk about coaching for myself, it's usually I just bring questions rather than answers. And there's a real specific skill set in coaching about just bringing good questions where you actually don't need to be an expert at all in that area. You just bring the questions to help the person discover stuff. So there's quite a range of things, but they often overlap. And in the classic sense of discipleship, well, in a sense, that is true mentoring. If discipleship is seeing us transform, become more like Jesus, that would be the ultimate of Christian mentoring. And discipleship, that word, I feel, could almost be interchangeable, but it's the sheer intentionality of it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with what was said, and I love what was said. I think for me, the biggest distinguishing mark between a mentor and like a coach or a consultant is a mentor shares their life with you. Like when I'm mentoring somebody or being mentored, I want to share life with that person. I'm not just coming to them for a few tidbits of advice. I want to share life. I want to see your life, and I want you to see my life. And so I think mentoring is really an invitation to do this walk together. And so it's not just like top down. It's more like, hey, let's come alongside one another. And yeah, maybe I'm a few steps ahead of you, and I'm going to bring you along as well. But really, mentorship, the way that I've seen it and experienced it, is really just an invitation to share life together.
Yeah, that's good. Ryan, based on your metaphor of a walk, a friend of mine, I own a snare, a couple of days ago, just gave me an illustration. It's like if you're an experienced hiker and you're hiking with someone that's more experienced with you, or you're an inexperienced hiker hiking with someone more experienced, that more experienced hiker has an immeasurable value to you, even if you've never walked the same terrain together. They just know the concept of where you're going. They know the wilderness. They feel comfortable. So despite the fact that you may be in uncharted trails or uncharted terrain, the experience of that more experienced person can aid, given a whole bunch of situations like, Ryan, what you said, when you're coming along with each other. So I very much see it kind of in that role. Someone with just a little bit more experience, a broader depth to be able to bring confidence and explore with that person their full potential.
Yeah, I want to say hi to Cal Fisher, Phil Williams, Josiah and Kaylee, whole bunch of people joining in to watch right now. So hi to you guys. Let's jump into another question here. Why is mentoring so important in our day and age, just across generations? Why is mentoring so important? What are the special advantages that mentoring has, in ministry, in business, in leadership?
For me, especially based on what we've been talking about with what it is, I think the advantage is that it helps narrow the gap between generational components or geographical difficulties, and especially in the last year, it's a way to stay connected without being in the same place. And I think the advantage, like Ryan was talking about, of sharing life and then that imparting of spirit and wisdom and experience, it's just a unique landscape and a unique relationship that gets built. And I think in the US in particular, where there's a lot of generational divide on a lot of fronts, to have a mentor who's seen more and tasted more and has that broader base of experience just gives the mentee an opportunity to see something outside of their context. And we kind of get stuck in these silos of thought, or for a lot of us in ministry, we're the only person doing it, and we share an office with ourselves and our computer. And so it's just a way to see outside of that and to have an experience that's bigger than the narrow focus of action sports ministry that we can kind of get stuck in.
My mentor used to always ask the question, who knows what life is like for you on the inside? And he said, it's a really important question because it measures the degree of community that you experience. And everybody needs to be seen by someone. And I think one of the really important roles of mentoring is just to see someone, isn't it a relief? Someone knows what life is like for me on the inside, and I think if you can create an environment, a place safe where someone can share their life, and I've really enjoyed some of the ways that the others have shared that, doing life together, journeying together, one step ahead, all of that's helpful. But I think there's something about being able to see someone and to help them to be able to go down deep and to be able to share what's really going on.
Just two things I think of is it's easy to get content. Any of us can get a whole bunch of knowledge and we tend to be quite individualistic. And so we do our own personal research, and in a way like never before in history, just off your phone, you can Google any kind of input. But mentoring brings so much more than knowledge, and it's so much more than just doing it solo. So I think there's the benefit of the acquiring the life experience of another person and just not doing life alone. There's a huge advantage of mentoring compared to just researching information.
For me, I've always found from a young age, just I don't know why, but just been really interested in pursuing mentorship, like people mentoring me. And I think it's because, especially when I first came into ministry, I just didn't know the questions to ask. Mm-hmm. And so just having somebody that could help me figure out the right questions to ask was incredibly helpful. But beyond that, I think a lot of mentorship and discipleship, it's more caught than taught. So because of the sharing life aspect of it, just being able to watch somebody who has a little bit more experience than me, just watch their life, how they interact with their congregation, how they interact with their small groups, their local group of believers, their spouse, their kids, has just been, it's immeasurable. It's just an incredible way to grow as an individual. But really, I think the biggest part of this is, like we struggle a lot because a lot of us live in individualistic societies and cultures. And if we're going to really grow, we need to be in community. Ephesians 4 is all about, we need to be in that community so we can actually grow into the image of Jesus, not only individually, but as the church. And so I think that's huge, is just being able to surround yourself with people who are going to push you to Jesus, and you get to watch their life and you get to watch how they're doing it.
I think about that strand of three, that the Bible speaks about. And I think not only, are there two, and of course that verse can mean so many things in translation, but that Jesus Christ himself is with us, and he's enjoying, our relationships and our passing on of knowledge with one another. But I think, I think of my own experience being a mentor, that it's really helped me to flesh out my own confidence and what I have to pass along, because I think it's even, that we're all different ages on this call, but as you age in ministry, you're still struggling along, like tripping through that confidence, right? And so when you have something to pass along, I think it can increase your own confidence, but it also raises your own level of accountability, to that younger generation. And I love who said Eli, it kind of brings together generations and brings together different ages. And I believe God has created us to be in community with one another, and we learn best in that multi-generational levels.
Does anybody have any good stories of like a failed mentorship? or a good one, I guess we can go to that too.
Well, yeah, I'm good at failure. I spent the first years of our ministry going to skate parks. I was a skater, I still am. But just understanding at the parks that we were at, like it was in the 90s, so it was a lot of guys at the skate parks at skate spots. But it was just this continuation of boys raising boys, kids raising kids, teenagers raising teenagers. And I mean, I had it in myself as a kid. I wanted to be guided by someone that was older than me that understood my scene. And we would look at all these skaters at our parks and go, they are trying so hard to learn from each other, to understand their lives in the context of what they're doing. But there's nobody here that has any greater experience than the other. They're all on a flat field, and they've sort of isolated themselves that way. But we thought, man, here's our opportunity. Like, we've learned a lot of things the hard way, but at least we can be a light in that fog for these kids, that instead of just thinking, oh, my friend did that and he totally destroyed himself, I shouldn't do that. But to say, hey, before you try that, let's look at this. Let's ask some questions. So that was one of the motivators for us, seeing all that kind of kids raising kids stuff and just going, oh man, this is so good, almost. And to be able to speak into that was really fun for us.
So I think relationships built on trust, right? And so not really my own story, but I know I recently had breakfast with somebody and they were like, oh, I just want to tell you about all the people I'm mentoring. And then they were telling me personal things that they were discussing. And like, I was just took me off guard. I didn't know what to say. And so I would say, just especially for women, trust is so vital. And for those women on the call, and always when I meet with somebody, whether I'm the mentor or the mentee, I say to them, I just want to let you know that everything you've shared with me will not be spoken, and shared with anyone else. And I actually say it every time, it seems repetitive, but it reminds me, and I've heard myself promise. And I think it solidifies that, we can trust one another. So I just really encourage you to use that as part, because it's tragic when information is shared.
Hey, I don't come from a Christian family or upbringing. I was a young dad. I had a couple of the elders from my church who were painting a building. And I stepped out in a bold step of faith as a young 32-year-old and said, hey, Harry, Fred, got any advice for a young Christian dad starting out? These guys were elders in my church in their 70s, and Harry put his paintbrush down and looked at Fred, and Fred looked back at Harry. And after an awkward silence, Fred said, I think it's a shame you don't sing the old hymns like we used to. And I went, is that it? And originally I was pretty hurt, and then I was angry, and then I realized, man, even though these guys are older and mature men, they had no emotional capacity to make that connection. So I certainly said, man, I'm never going to say that when someone asks for some mentoring advice. So that was a real disappointment, but how special. And only an hour ago, I was on a call with one of the guys who's watching here now, Cal Fisher, who I've asked to be a mentor for me and someone in the next life stage. And how good it is to have someone who is actually in their 70s and has the emotional and relational intelligence to be able to connect well. So a bad story and a good story.
Can I just add to that? I just think that's really helpful, Brett. I know for me, I do a fair bit of mentoring, but I'm just so thankful. Brett actually put me onto this, that each of us, it's really helpful to have someone who's ahead of us, someone who's beside us, a running mate, and someone who we're mentoring. And with all the guys I'm mentoring, I really try to help them to make sure they have a running mate, someone beside them, but also who else can they be investing in. And this is an edge mentoring that surprised me at one level. It's always good to tell the good stories, isn't it? But I mentor a guy in Serbia who I met when I was just doing some training there. He was a bodybuilder and he just had a fair bit to be working through. And he keeps saying to me, "You don't mentor me, you father me." And at first I thought back to that. No, I just want to be your mentor. And he said, "Well, my father left when I was 4. And I just never had a father figure in my life." And he said, "That's the thing. You've shown me, you've taught me what it means to be a father. And you've helped me to see who my heavenly father is." He could never call God Father because he didn't have a framework. And I think that's the thing that happens when you mentor, all these surprising things that you just don't expect just open up for you, new possibilities, new ways of seeing it. And so, yeah, mentoring is fathering. I think that's part, or mothering, of what we do. And it's just, for me, a new edge that I'm still adjusting to, but it's a beautiful phase in my life.
Let's go a little bit more practical. Okay, so if you're looking for a good mentor, what should you be looking for? One of the guys, Reed, typed in a question. He said, what are some of the key traits in personality, or maybe in what you need or whatever? What is it that you look for in a good mentor?
Someone who carves out time, they're enthusiastic, they have something to share. And I think so important is someone who's pursuing God and they're praying for the wisdom that they're going to be sharing with you, and they're praying for the opportunities to walk alongside you, and then investing, in you spiritually, not just an advice giver, but somebody who's walking with you.
Ryan, I'm interested in hearing more of your story, because as a younger person, you said you were looking for a mentor to ask the right questions. Maybe fill that in more.
Yeah. I mean, when I originally moved to Colorado to start working with SFC full time, there was just a lot there. I mean, I wanted to be a good part of the local church. I wanted to be connected to the Hill. And there's a lot of guys that have been here before me that have been doing both of those things really, really well. And I was like, how do I do that well? I want to be this bridge. SFC's mission statement is we want to bridge the shred culture to Jesus by partnering with the local church. And I'm like, I want to learn how to do that well. And so, yeah, I think for me, one of the biggest traits that I look for is not only are they pursuing God, not only do they have the time, but are they humble? Do I sense some humility in them? Because that will actually kind of lead me to want to submit to what they have to say. If I just feel like they feel like they got it all figured out, that it's just like I'm here and you're here, and that's the way it goes, then I'm not super interested. I actually kind of get put off by that. But if they're humble and they are willing to be transparent and vulnerable with me and share the mistakes that they've made, then that's something that I'm looking for in a mentor for sure. Because more is learned. I think more is caught than taught. So just being able to learn from their mistakes has been huge for me. And I was thinking about the last question of what is your worst mentoring? I've done mentoring wrong a ton of times. So just learning to just try to be humble and transparent and vulnerable with people. I think it leads to mutual submission. And I think submission, I'll just say this before I stop, is that submission for me is more of a love word than it is an authority word. There's a willingness that comes with that. So
other thing I'd add, I just think somehow intuitively, like that you trust, and I found it really helpful, a lot of the stuff people have been saying, but it's what do you need most of all? You just know that they'll listen to you. When it's so great when someone listens to you, you're able to go deep and look around, and I think that's what you need. You're not someone who says, "Oh, I know exactly how you feel," and all they want to do is share your story. I just tried, as I'm mentoring, I just try to move away from advice. When someone asks me, "What do you think I should do?" I'll always say to them, "What do you think? What do you think you need to do?" Because I think the answer's there within them, and our job is to help them to be able to get rid of anything that stops them from hearing that. So I think you need to find someone who will listen to you. And I was looking for a mentor, and look, he was a lovely guy, but he just talked so much. I just had to pull back. I didn't want advice. I just wanted someone who'd listen to me. So I want to encourage you to try to intuitively, you'll know the person. But it takes courage to say, "Would you mentor me?" Because you can either think, "Oh, they're so busy, they're always doing it." But I actually think it's one of the biggest compliments that you can ever be asked. If someone says, "Would you mentor me? Would you be interested in that?" And I don't always say yes straight away. I pray and think it through. But I just want to be someone who is open to being able to help people to grow.
Jeff typed in here that mentors and mentees need to be fat, faithful, available, and teachable. And I think that's a really good, that's important as well. Resonate with what you're saying, Ryan and Marty, as well. That's awesome. What are some more key traits that you look for, or as you're looking for a mentor, what should you be looking for?
I'd say really quick and really practical is set a timeline for it. Get a space, a start and a finish, and say, so that you can experiment. Like you could talk to someone and go, "Hey, for 2 months, could you meet with me once every week?" Or, for a year, could we meet once every month? And that way, if it bombs, well, at least you both know that you've got this kind of endpoint. You can glean stuff in the middle of it, and you're good to move on. So that might be one thing that helps, regardless of who you pick.
I'm going to interrupt our conversation on this. Have any of you had to ever fire a mentor?
Fire a mentor.
Yeah.
Please do tell. How do you do that?
The job I had prior to this, which was not at all ministry related, but I worked for a fellow Jesus follower, brought me in with a lot of stoke, a lot of hype, and was like, "I'll be with you in this every step of the way. Like, we'll do this thing together." And like, yeah, it's just a business, but like, we're on mission, right? And the things that we've been talking about as like what to look for in a good mentor, someone who's honest and owns their mistakes and all those pieces, just evaporated like really quickly. So there was like a big flash and no bang. And so it was really like, honestly, like pretty hurtful and damaging. But it's also helped me understand like, oh, these are the mentors that I don't want. And these are the questions to ask of mentors and what I'm looking for. Because that lack of follow through and initiation was killer. And I think just the recognition, and one of the notes I had was like, does this person have respect for others all the time? And are they respected by others? And if not, then like, who are those other people and what relationships show up there? Because we all have people who don't think highly of us because of a negative interaction or whatever at one point in time. And that's being human. But is the like general regard for someone high, or at least like moderately high? So that thermometer definitely makes a big difference. But the actual like, "I'm out of here, dude," took a long time to get to, because you're stuck in some ways. You're like, well, we like went into this thing together, and it's a weird experience. There's still ramifications 2 years later. But those are for offline discussions.
Yeah. I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that. And if you're looking to be a good mentee, someone who's being mentored, what are some of the things that how do you like be a good mentee for your mentor? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I got you, Johnny.
Show up.
And even I was going to say, if I've got someone who says they want me to be a mentor to them, I got to look at them and think, well, this is the kind of thing I want someone who also not only, like you said, will show up, because some guys may say, yeah, I want this, and then not turn up. I obviously think it's important that people have the same sense of humility and teachability. Even giving a person some space about what is it that you really want. Have you got some clarity about that? And would you put in some effort to think through what maybe some of the issues and questions you have? If you put no effort, in a sense, maybe you're just wanting me to be a shortcut for you. But that sense of honesty, teachability, putting in some effort, those are the things I'd be looking for before I'd say yes.
I really like it when I can think I pick it pretty quickly if someone really wants to grow, like they're there. And I guess the way I test, you can see it, is that they share what's really going on, and they're committed. Like, you're right, they turn up, sure, that's part of it, but you know that they want to be there, they want to grow. And I'm mentoring a guy at the moment who said to me, oh, look, I really want it, can you mentor me every week? And we made this commitment. He's just not turning up. And I've just learned, well, I just said to him the other night, look, when you're ready, come back, we can keep going, but you've got to want it, And I think that's the thing, a mentee, you really want to grow, you really want to change, you want to get to the bottom of what holds you back from truly being the person that God's made you to be. So yeah, I think that desire to want to grow is important.
It's funny, Marty, because even by saying, hey, this isn't right, you're still mentoring that person even as you close off the relationship.
Apparently he didn't like that, so he left. No, it might be an internet connection. Phil Goldney bounced out earlier because his internet connection was spotty, so I'm sure he'll join back up again. Are any of you, oh, go ahead, Laura.
I like what Marty said earlier, that cheerleader. Like, we do need that cheerleader in our life, but we also don't want to mentor someone that just wants to hear the positive and just wants to be cheered on in every decision that they're making. We do want somebody who will take an honest look as we're walking alongside them and show some initiative too. Because when you're asking someone to mentor, you're asking someone to help you grow, and hopefully you're ready to grow. In those things.
Yeah, it's good. Have any of you, are any of you familiar with like mentoring covenants or mentoring agreements, or do you use those when you start up a mentoring relationship?
Sounds pretty formal.
Yeah, I've heard of that, Johnny, and really apart from just getting clarity about expectations, and then, like Dean said, setting some parameters. Well, let's meet up once a month for this year. I wouldn't have anything more than that, Johnny. And really, apart from just getting clarity about expectations, and then, like Dean.
Hey. Good. What are some of the principles in mentoring to ensure that it goes well? We've been talking about some of those, setting up a time being committed to a time, but what would you put into some sort of an agreement with mentor, mentee, to ensure that the relationship goes well? I like what Dean was saying about setting a timeline to try it out for 2 weeks, 2 months, whatever it might be. What else? What are some other principles that you can put into place to ensure that mentoring goes well?
It's been talked about already, but like that honesty and humility on both sides, and then consistency and like Dean said, like showing up. But one of the things that I've thought a lot about that I think helps mentorship in both directions is just recognizing that there's not a power dynamic, that it's not just like the guy or gal who knows everything and the guy or gal who's there to learn everything, that like you're there in relationship and walking alongside and recognize, like giving credence to the reality of a difference in experience and knowledge and wisdom. But that's not something for me as a mentee showing up, knowing that that's not going to be held over my head as like, well, you're just young, you don't know anything, like to not be written off. And similarly to like not be someone who writes off someone who's older and has gray hair and more experience or whatever, to not just be like, well, you don't understand, you're like, you've moved on from your time. Like just owning those things up front so that there's not that dynamic or that kind of writing off one another.
For me, I think two things. The first thing that came to mind was patience. But I would say patience like before agreeing to mentor someone, or like patience in looking for the right mentor. And so I was really impacted when I was reading through the Gospel of Luke, and just Jesus spent the entire night praying about the disciples whom he would invest in before choosing the 12. And so just spending that time to really pray and consider, who is it that God you have for me to mentor? If somebody asks me, am I going to take the time to pray and to see if that's a good fit, the right thing to do? And same thing with the mentor. I spent 2 months praying before I actually went to the mentor that I ended up having for the last year. Just because there was like one guy that I thought it was going to be, and then the Lord just shifted the direction of that. And I was like, oh, wow. And it ended up being an awesome relationship. So that's number one is don't just jump into it right away. Take some time to pray, maybe even consult other people. The other thing that I would say is, I think it's already been said, but I'll just say it again here because I think it fits, is what is the goal of the relation? Like, do you have a specific goal set in mind? Like, so if somebody approaches me and says, hey, do you think you could mentor me? I'm going to ask them what specific things they're looking to be mentored on, or what specific things they want to be worked on, because I might not be the best person to mentor them. I might actually want to point them in a different direction to somebody that I know is gifted or has maybe more experience to speak into that specific situation. And so I would just maybe set the goals out pretty clear from the get-go.
I have a question actually for this panel too, about the parameters of mentoring. I think that we've been kind of assuming that a mentorship relationship, it feels like we're talking about a relationship between two adults. I'm curious about your perspective, if you've found mentoring opportunities with younger people, with teenagers, with kids. Obviously, it's not the same parameters, but at what point do you feel mentorship becomes mentorship? And at what point is it just working with kids? And what's the dynamics of a concrete thinking kid versus a more abstract thinking adult that wants the guidance? Kids need direction too. What does that mean in a mentoring style, in a world of mentorship?
Like the difference between parenting and mentoring.
Yeah.
I mean, we just had a young 10-year-old foster boy with us for a 10-day holiday, so I considered, since he has no father figure for that 10 days, I'm parenting him as a dad, and we're doing stuff in the garage, and we're, trying to just be an example and pull him into line where he needs to be. But it doesn't have that element of that honesty and vulnerability with the power disbalance that you're talking about, Ryan and Eli. Obviously, if they're a child, you are much more of a parent, so your mentoring is more of a parental directive thing,
I'm gonna play along. I have a friend here in the cities that he started mentoring a boy downtown through a ministry that he and I were both serving at the time, and that boy is now actually his son. So he mentored this kid right into a spot where his mom said, you know, you're with him all the time. You're taking good care of him. Would you take him on and have him live with you? And he said, well, yeah, I would love to. And so it turned into a father-son relationship. And now that kid has grown up and is going to college and kind of got out of the inner city, out of the ghetto and out of the lifestyle that he was headed towards. And so I think that's truly sharing life. That's life on life, you know, the full length of it. I've always been inspired and encouraged by that story because it wasn't just one thing, it was all of it, the whole thing. And that's not going to happen for every person. But just an incredible testimony of the power of mentoring and where it can go and what it can look like to share life on life.
Yeah, Dean, I think speaking to that question a little bit, like with kids and students, just the burden of showing up and being consistent really falls on the mentor a lot more. Like being an initiator is one of the notes I made. Like at that point, especially just having those check-ins, setting that parameter of consistency and then kind of holding them to it, I think is a big part of like you were talking about, like how we mentor them when they're in a concrete thinking kind of period of development. So being the one who drives the consistency and asks the questions, but then ultimately, as it's been talked about, like being the one who listens and isn't just there like giving advice all the time, but you like set the structure and then they color in the picture.
Yeah, just on that issue of initiative, and especially Marty's alluded quite a bit to that more intimate relationship, and particularly if you're a father figure or a mother figure. I think if I commit to mentor someone on that more personal level, that the initiative should come from the mentor to pursue that person. I think that reflects the father heart of God, the mother heart of God, that you go after them. I know, if you're in a business setting and you're doing a business mentor, well, the younger junior person is usually chasing the mentor because they want their skill, they want their wisdom, and it's all up to them. And the mentor would sit back passively saying, well, if you want it, come chase me for it. I think God's way is that the father heart pursues. So I'm a really big believer in taking that initiative and making it happen. And people that I've mentored on that more intimate level have consistently said the sheer fact that I pursued them was really special.
Would you guys, and here's another practical question that came in from one of the leaders who's watching. How many, we'll show on fingers, how many mentors do you currently have?
Do you mean mentees or mentors?
Mentors. How many mentors do you have? And then we'll do mentees. Okay, 2, 1, 2, 2, 1, 1. Okay. And how many mentees, how many people are you mentoring? 2, 2, 10, 2, 10. Let's see what happens when you get older, you get more mentees. That was one of the questions is, how many, can you have many mentors or too many mentees? Like how many is a good number? It seems like 2 is a good number. And as you get older and get gray hair, then you get to have 10 because you're just that much more cool. What about mentoring or no hair? What about mentoring outside of your local area? Like, do you have mentors who live overseas, or is everybody like close to you? Meet face to face once a week, or is it, can you jump on Zoom? How does that work for you?
I'll jump in really quick. I think that some people are just gifted at it. Brett, as an example, I can see like the ability, the gifting that God's Spirit has given you to be a mentor. It just exudes out of you. Like even the relationship that you and I have, I can just feel that gift that you have. So you're going to have an amazing capacity to do that. I don't know if I'm that good of a mentor. It's just not I might be, but it just doesn't feel like it's my gift. I have other things that I do that I feel more in the sweet spot in. So I think it might depend a lot on, how you feel God's gifted you, or as people acknowledge your gifting in that regard, you can take on more or less. But I wouldn't try to push it. Like I don't try to push it on myself just because I'm getting more experience, I guess.
I think it's true to say, as Marty said, really rubbing up close to people. I like what you said. You've observed a lot more courts than taught, like Ryan. So it is difficult. I would never mentor someone I'd never met. When I say someone I have never met in a personal context. And even a younger guy who approached me, I said, well, I've actually never been to your home. I've never met your wife or your children. So I will drive 2 hours to meet them at least once, just to get the context. When people ask me, you're at a conference or something and they say, I'd like you to be my mentor, they usually just mean, I want you to be my leadership coach. And that's okay. I can do a leadership coach and call it mentoring. But if it's going to be more whole life mentoring, next life stage development, it's much harder to do that online. So I've got a mix of both. But often it's more the leadership coaching, and a bit of personal stuff overlaps with that. And you can do that on a call in an hour and develop that well. But even with that, eventually I would always try to meet that person, face to face in their own home, ideally, even if it happens only once or twice.
Yeah, I have a mixture of both. But here I mentor, I do quite a bit of Zoom mentoring, but here what I find really helpful with these Japanese guys is that you don't normally go into people's home here in Japan. If you have a meal, you go to a restaurant, homes are quite small. But my wife's a great cook and she's got such a gift of hospitality, and we're always having people around, and our house is quite open. And one guy just put in his thesis, so we're celebrating him. One guy got into drama school, so we're having a celebration. It's this whole thing of entering into life. And people often really love watching my wife and I relating together and seeing a model of that. And our dog, they walk our dog, they really enjoy that. And I kind of think this thing of doing life together is such an important part. And I think you just pick up intuitively so much. So I think that's a really important part of mentoring, is doing life. And that's why it is so helpful to see the person face to face.
It sounds like a lot of organic relationship that's very authentic. But one of the questions that we had that came in here was about, do any of your organizations have a formal mentoring program? Given the organic nature of mentoring relationships, it might seem that it's kind of difficult to have a formal program for mentoring. How have you seen that work in your organizations? Or do you have anything like that?
We do not have a formal, you don't sign a form and you get a mentor, or I'm a mentor, or you're the mentee. But I think it happens naturally. The organization I serve with is quite vast, and lots of different age groups, from very young to more of a retirement age. And so I do think it happens naturally. And, that's something that I've felt called to, is to come alongside younger women in different stages. And so hopefully if you're involved with a healthy organization, that's occurring.
Yeah, I would say we've used the word, we want to make it part of our culture rather than part of our program. And so just trying to generate a culture of mentoring. And we've used the phrase, especially amongst peak leaders, that no one feels alone. And that's a good leadership principle anyway. But, push that down to at least everybody has somebody. That's part of the culture.
We don't have a formal program with it. When we were doing the leadership program, it was a 6-month residential training program people would come for. And that's to learn specific kinds of skills within, doing discipleship within this kind of a cultural context. But what we did do was after a month, after I got spent a significant amount of time learning about the students that did come, we would pair them with mentors that would best fit their need. So it wasn't necessarily like, hey, this is a formal program, but we would say, hey, we think mentorship's really important. And so we're going to help facilitate that relationship for you. And that's after asking specific kinds of questions to both the mentee and the mentor to figure out what would be the best kind of relationship.
Yeah, there's a interesting backside maybe to a lot of, well, in many organizations, perhaps, I don't know, I notice it occasionally that we have this passion to be disciplers, and which is a great thing, but we sometimes, I think, confuse that with mentorship, where discipleship ends up being, whether it's defined as it or not, it ends up being a teaching, a presenting of information. And we sometimes confuse that with, oh, we're mentoring these young people that we're working with. Well, in a sense, you're mentoring if you're conveying information, but it's for a specific purpose that may or may not be aligned with what a mentorship purpose is. So there's a danger, I think, of sometimes confusing the idea of us being mentors with actually us wanting to be disciples and wanting to, in that kind of a traditional way, want to push the agenda that we have on the people that we have, rather than being curious about them, or contemplative about them. We just want to get them to this point, so perhaps a danger there.
Yeah, that's good. Let's talk a little bit about resources that you guys have seen for mentoring. We'll kind of wrap up with this. What are some resources? Do you have any books that you've read that have just, blown your mind or given you all kinds of ideas? Or do you have, podcasts that you listen to, or classes that you've taken, or even some YouTube content, or, where are you pulling information or learning about mentoring from?
I think the best resource for me has been experience, just actually getting involved. But a good book for me, and I've actually, the students that have come through our leadership program, this is the last book that they have in the course. It's called With, A Practical Guide to Informal Mentoring and Intentional Disciple Making. I found that book to be really helpful because one of the things, when I first read it, one of the common myths that I thought about with mentorship was, man, this is going to take up so much of my time. Like, this is one more thing I got to add to my schedule, and I don't know if I have the time to do that. And what this book is all about is like, no, you're just inviting people into the things that you're already doing in life. So if I'm going to go to the mountain, I'm going to invite people to come to the mountain with me. I'm going to invite people to come over and have dinner with me and my wife and my kids. Like, I want them to see, I think Marty said it and Brett said it and a bunch of people have said it, that I want them to see how I interact with my spouse and my kids. I want them to see how I interact with people on the hill. Like, and so literally it's just inviting people into the things that I'm already doing. And that's what this book hit on super hard. And it was really challenging for me, but it revolutionized the way that I go about mentoring.
I'm sure when Eldridge wrote Wild at Heart, it wasn't that he wanted it as a mentoring book, but I find it's the best way. Often with the guys I mentor, I really encourage them to read the book. But I just feel it's just so helpful as I'm mentoring guys to help them discover their masculine spirit. But the book helped me to really find mine. So I'm always looking for books that resource me, that I can help. I know if it's been helpful for me, often I might try and pass it on. But there's plenty of great books out there on mentoring. But that's why I like that one on With. That's great. That's the sort of thing that I reckon we're looking for.
Yeah, Marty's writing a book on mentoring, male
Yeah.
mentoring. I read it. He's got some great summaries, but anything that gives you the bigger picture of life. So I've just recently, Bob Burford's book, Halftime, is a great look at the transition of life. Richard Rohr's book, Falling Upward, talks about the two seasons of life. John Eldridge's other book, Fathered by God, is awesome. Cassie Carson's The World Needs a Father has an awesome range of stuff. Many of those are male orientated, but some of the principles are transferable. And certainly observing others. There's an Australian Christian mentoring network, which I joined, and you can sit in on calls like this with other mentors and then processing. I run a men's mentoring cohort, and we get together and we workshop certain issues confidentially of things that people are wrestling with. And that's an intentional once every 3-month meeting where I get together with some similar age guys. They happen to be all men talking about male issues and how we're mentoring. So that's a face-to-face workshopping discussion group that I find really stimulating. Those are a couple.
Yeah, awesome. We can always add more and throw some resources up in the chat. But I think I want to wrap up our time today with a challenge. With the Facebook group that we put together, there's this cool thing. I'm going to try to do this sharing of the screen bit here. Hopefully I don't screw it up. I hope you guys can see this here, but this is our Acts Network page on Facebook. There's this little tab here called Mentorship, and you can click on that, and within there you can find a mentor or sign up to be a mentor. And so you can see some of the guys here. You could get Brett as a mentor right here. Just click start a conversation and you're good to go. This is a practical challenge though for you guys. I want to encourage you to try this out. Go sign up on there and in the next 24 hours. And if you want to be a mentor towards someone who's working in action sports ministry, or if you want to be mentored. I actually met a guy named Reed on this platform, and him and I have been meeting together every other month for a couple of months now, and he's just getting started out. And this week, actually, they're getting a mini ramp built in their church, and he has been working with a guy, and one of the guys that he's been reaching out to is going to be coming to church with him pretty soon, who's not a believer. And it's just been exciting for me to be able to see how God is working in his life and just be able to share some of my experience with him. And so I want to encourage everyone to utilize that, because again, within this network, there is so much knowledge and so much resources, and just a broad base of people who are willing to help and share some information. It's not 100% full on life mentoring. Maybe it's a bit more coaching esque, but I think it's helpful. So I want to challenge you guys to go on there and do that. I want to thank each of you guys for participating in this conversation about mentoring, and I want to say a big thank you to everyone who's been commenting online. Let's continue this conversation. Let's not end it here. Let's continue to discuss this and share resources with each other on Facebook. And please, we're going to have another Shred Talk next month, February 16th. If you want to mark your calendar for that so you don't miss it. We are still deciding on topics, so if you have ideas on that, please comment those in. Maybe I'll get a poll going and we can vote on some stuff that we can chat about next month. Thank you guys, and we will see you again soon.